The White House wants this week's public image to be about spectacle, prestige, and American strength, but the material surrounding that image points to a much harder question. What happens when political presentation becomes easier to see than the government's underlying problems? Melania Trump appeared at the White House to promote a Washington Grand Prix. Officials described the event as an exercise in American soft power, and Donald Trump was shown talking about everything from race cars to flagpoles. At the same time, the source material points to economic pressure, military decisions, and a controversy involving White House aide Natalie Harp. The real test is not whether the event looked strange. It is whether the administration's presentation matches the record we actually have. Start with Melania Trump's appearance, because the source tries to make that appearance carry much more meaning than the available evidence can safely support. She walked out, greeted the audience, joked that she had heard people missed her, and participated in a promotional event built around the Grand Prix. She was presented with a helmet. She praised a race car as gorgeous and powerful. Those details are documented in the material, but then the interpretation moves quickly from what we can see to what we are supposed to infer, that her appearance was somehow connected to rumors involving Natalie Harp, and that visible distance between Donald and Melania Trump proves trouble between them. That is exactly where evidence discipline matters. Two people standing apart at a public event can look awkward. It can feed an existing narrative. It can even be politically useful footage. But a clip of body language does not establish the private state of a marriage, and it certainly does not prove why someone appeared at an event. The source itself offers no document, direct statement, or independently established timeline connecting Melania Trump's appearance to the rumors about Harp. So the first payoff is important. The appearance is real. The causal story attached to it is not established by the material we have. And that distinction matters because the stronger story is sitting in plain sight. The White House was not merely hosting a race promotion. Monica Crowley, identified in the source as the United States Chief of Protocol, explicitly framed the event as an exercise in American soft power. Her argument was straightforward. Visitors come to the United States for major events, experience the country, then return home with an impression of American freedom, enterprise, government, leadership, and strength. That is an official political claim about what the event represents. Now we have something testable. If this is soft power, then the question is not whether a race car looks impressive on the White House lawn. The question is whether the broader conduct of the government strengthens the credibility that soft power depends on. Crowley contrasted soft power with the hard power she said the president was exercising around the world. The source material, however, also describes ongoing war, pressure on military resources, and controversial personnel and procurement decisions. Those issues are not disproved by a successful promotional event. A government can stage a polished cultural event and still face serious strategic problems. The contradiction appears when the spectacle is offered as evidence of strength rather than simply as an event. So apply a consistency test. If an administration you opposed held a glossy international sporting event while facing major questions about war, prices, military readiness, and internal credibility, would you accept the event itself as evidence that the country's influence was thriving, or would you ask for something more measurable? That standard should not change with the party in power. This pattern keeps repeating, a real visual detail followed by a much larger inference. And that is precisely why this story is more revealing when we slow down just enough to separate the two. The administration benefits when critics make claims that are easier to rebut than the underlying record. If the criticism becomes, Melania stood far away, therefore we know why she came, the White House can dismiss the inference and avoid the harder questions about what its officials are claiming, what its policies are producing, and how public resources and attention are being used. Now we get to Natalie Harp, because this is where the source makes its most sensational allegations. It describes rumors about Harp traveling with Trump, claims about a catering container, suggestions that Caroline Leavitt resigned because of a flight arrangement, and references to supposed letters and Harp's security clearance status. Those allegations are politically explosive. They are also not established in the supplied material with primary documents or independent corroboration. The source repeatedly presents speculation alongside clips and commentary, but it does not provide the evidentiary chain needed to convert those claims into facts. One thing in the material is much clearer. Senator John Ossoff, in a television clip quoted by the source, criticized the White House and specifically referred to Trump traveling with Natalie. He also attacked the broader circle of aides around the president, arguing that officials were feeding Trump flattery rather than necessary information and connecting that criticism to the administration's war policy. That is a political accusation made by an identifiable senator. We can report that he said it. We cannot treat his rhetoric as independent proof of every factual premise embedded inside it. That distinction is not cosmetic. Without it, a viewer can hear three different categories of information: an observable event, a senator's accusation, and an unverified rumor, and walk away remembering all three as equally confirmed. That is how political narratives harden, not always through a fabricated document or an outright lie, but through proximity. Put a verified clip next to an allegation, repeat them in the same emotional register, and the certainty of the verified item can bleed into the unverified one. A verified clip can make an allegation beside it feel proven. Repeat that packaged conclusion, and you inherit the credibility risk. Don't get played. The evidence discipline for American politics gives you a source chain test for catching that gap before you react. It is reusable on the next clip, poll, filing, statistic, or narrative. The complete ebook is only $9 one time. Open the description and click the first link now. The same link is in the first pinned comment, because the next evidence is stronger than rumor. Then comes the aircraft carrier story, and this is more concrete because the source attributes it to CNN reporting. According to the material, the Navy was weighing a change involving the future USS Doris Miller, an aircraft carrier slated to honor Doris Miller, the black sailor celebrated for heroism during the attack on Pearl Harbor. The source says two people familiar with internal discussions told CNN there had been conversations about potentially naming the carrier after Donald Trump instead, while honoring Miller through a different warship and recommending him for the Medal of Honor. If accurately reported, that is not merely a branding decision. Ship names are institutional memory. They tell sailors and the public which stories the military chooses to carry forward. Doris Miller's place in American history comes from documented courage under attack and from the significance of a black sailor being recognized in a segregated military. Moving his name from an aircraft carrier to another vessel would not erase that history, but it would change the scale and symbolism of the original honor. And naming a carrier for a sitting president would inevitably raise questions about personalization of military institutions. The important uncertainty is that the source says the Navy was weighing the change and that it was unclear what final name would be chosen. Internal conversations are not a completed decision, that procedural status matters. A proposal can be objectionable without being final. Reporting can reveal a serious possibility without proving an outcome. If we collapse officials discussed it into the Navy did it, we make the story less accurate precisely when accuracy gives the criticism more force. This is one of the strongest findings in the material because it does not depend on reading body language or decoding rumors. It is a reported institutional deliberation with identifiable consequences for military tradition and political norms. The next questions are straightforward. Who initiated the discussion? What formal process governs the naming decision? Whether the proposal advanced beyond conversation? And what justification officials gave? Those answers would tell us whether this was loose internal talk or a serious attempt to redirect a major military honor toward the president. And compare that with the Grand Prix event. On one side, the White House presents international sport as a demonstration of national confidence and soft power. On the other, the source describes a Navy considering whether a major warship honor could be redirected from a Pearl Harbor hero toward the sitting commander-in-chief. Those two things are not legally or procedurally identical, but politically they point toward the same question. Is American prestige being expressed through durable institutions or increasingly through the personal image of the president? There is also a legitimate counter-argument. Presidents have long attached themselves to national ceremonies, military symbolism, major sporting events, and patriotic imagery. Political leadership always involves some degree of personal representation. A supporter could reasonably say that Trump's presence at the Grand Prix event, his interest in White House symbols, and even discussion of naming honors reflect a presidency trying to project confidence rather than undermine institutions. That interpretation cannot simply be mocked away. The test is where representation ends and personalization begins. A sporting event promoting the country is one thing. A final decision to rename a carrier for a sitting president, if that were actually to happen, would be a different category because it would alter an institutional honor with historical meaning. The source does not establish that final decision, so the fair conclusion is narrower. The reported discussion itself is politically significant, while the outcome remains unresolved. That is the political cost of sloppy certainty. The White House can point to the weakest allegation, deny or ridicule it, and then use that rebuttal to cast doubt on stronger reporting sitting beside it. This is a familiar defensive advantage in politics. If 10 accusations are bundled together and 2 are poorly supported, disproving those 2 can create the impression that all 10 collapsed. The answer is not to become less critical. It is to rank the evidence so the strongest claim cannot be sacrificed to the most dramatic one. So what is established here? Melania Trump publicly appeared at a White House Grand Prix event. The clips in the source show her speaking about the event and a race car. Monica Crowley publicly framed the occasion as soft power. Trump publicly spoke about White House flagpoles. The source contains an attributed CNN report that the Navy was considering a naming change involving the future USS Doris Miller, and that internal discussion had included Trump's name. Those are the pieces with the clearest evidentiary footing inside the supplied record. What is not established? The material does not prove that Melania appeared because of Natalie Harp rumors. It does not prove a private relationship narrative from body language. It does not independently establish the more sensational travel allegations involving Harp or the claim that Caroline Leavitt resigned because of them. It also does not provide enough primary economic or military documentation to prove its broadest conclusions about Treasury policy, fuel prices, the drone program, or the legality and overall condition of the war. Who has responsibility? The White House is responsible for the claims it chooses to make about American strength, leadership, and soft power. The relevant military institutions are responsible for explaining consequential program and naming decisions through proper channels. Reporters and political creators are responsible for distinguishing what they know from what they suspect. And viewers have a practical stake because the quality of that distinction determines whether public accountability is built on facts or on narratives that collapse under scrutiny. The broader lesson is uncomfortable for everyone. Spectacle can distract, but criticism can also distract when it becomes more interested in insinuation than proof. A race car on the White House lawn does not answer questions about economic policy, war, military readiness, or institutional norms. But rumors about a marriage or an aide do not answer those questions either. The evidence that matters most is the evidence that connects power to decisions and decisions to consequences. So the original question has an answer. The Grand Prix event may project confidence, but it cannot by itself establish the strength the administration says it represents. The strongest scrutiny in this record is not the awkward footage or the gossip. It is the gap between symbolic presentation and unresolved institutional questions, especially the reported Navy deliberation and the need for documented explanations of consequential policy choices. That is where accountability belongs, not in guessing what a glance means, but in demanding records for what government power actually does. Another political clip: filing, poll, accusation, or official explanation will soon ask you to believe the frame before you have the full evidence. Without a method, someone else chooses the context and you carry the credibility cost. Don't Get Played gives you a practical system for finding the missing piece before you share the conclusion across clips, polls, court filings, statistics, official statements, and synthetic media. The digital ebook costs only $9 as a one-time payment. Open the description and click the first link now. The same link is in the first pinned comment. A political reaction is easy. A defensible conclusion has to survive the evidence.